consider you guys my friends. I'm not wrong, am I?
Welcome back to another session of Captain's Counseling Corner. If you have not seen the other videos leading up to this, I will leave a card up here so you can start with the first video of the series so that you can catch up and you can realize where we are at in this video. This is video number 4 in the series, and last video we basically talked about the levels of friendship. And with levels of friendship, what I was mainly trying to point out was that for each of us, we all have a definition, and definition in terms is foundational to moving on in a conversation so that you cannot get mixed up or you cannot see each other's point of view. What I find interesting and what I really wanted to, in summary, kind of point out about what I was getting at in the last video is that every person has a definition of friendship. But what happens is, and what's happened recently, I don't know how many years, the past couple decades maybe, is that these definitions have been watered down, number one, and number two, the definitions have become muddy. And I also think this is not a coincidence. This is a reason for people to find an excuse not to go after these deeper relationships. And this was point number 2 when I made disclaimers about the difference between what I was saying and what I was not saying in case people were getting confused. And to summarize that point, I was basically trying to say that these acquaintance friendships, these friendships that don't have commitment, that are pretty basic in form, that they are good. That these are good relationships that everyone should have in their life. But what I was trying to show was that even though these are good, these are not the only relationships we should have in our lives, and that just like with first level questions and second level questions, all of us spend the majority of our time in these low-lying fruit relationships or these first level questions in our lives. And that's okay. But what I'm pushing us to do as each of these videos goes along is to challenge us to think about, why don't we have the second level relationships in our lives? What is it about us that stops us from getting to those deep-seated friendships, which I actually think should be the correct definition of friendship? So I think a lot of times people, whether it's subconscious or not, they say, oh, well, that's your definition of friend. That's not my definition of friend. And they do this subconsciously to relieve themselves of the responsibility for these kinds of relationships, and also because I think the underlying fear of having to risk as much to get those kinds of relationships. So we have been leading up to this for 3 videos, and now this being the 4th video, what I want to do today is I want to start us to change our focus and perspective onto how to get these relationships. I have been preaching, I have been really strongly suggesting that first we have to build the foundation of the house, and then once we build that foundation on the correct terms and the correct concrete, then we can start to talk about how we build the house and build it correctly. So today, that's what I want to do. I told you in the first and second video that there are 3 foundations to what I believe are necessary if you want these second level relationships, as I would call just basic friendship. This to me is what a friendship is defined by. And if you don't have these 3 things, then I think that by definition you cannot call someone a friend. I think it's very easy to muddy the waters in the definitions, which is why we spent so much time on it, so that we don't have to really deal with the idea of what real friendship is. Friendship versus acquaintance. So today we're going to deal with the first of the 3, and in the next 2 videos we'll get to the other 2. So I know that most of you are going to say there's only 3. There are lots of levels or thoughts or ideas of how you develop these kinds of second level relationships, or what I would just call friendship. But I just boil it down to 3 to try to make it as simple and as basic and summarizing as best I can how you get these relationships. And I mean, the best things come in 3s, right?
We are the 3 amigos.
El Guapo.
Let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel.
Okay, maybe not.
God bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Okay, so the first one on the list of what I like to call triship is also the most essential of the 3. Let me say that again. The first one, which you have seen in my tattoo in the first video, is also the most essential of the 3. Now, why do I say this? I say this because in order to establish the other 2, you must first have this one. So what is the one that we're talking about? What is the foundation of the triship? And that is proximity. Proximity is just basically defined as being close or as being near. If there's anything that's pretty obvious, it's the fact that movies reflect culture, or movies reflect the hearts of people. And that's why movies become popular and movies become less popular, is it really depends upon the story that's being told, because it's tugging or connecting with people's ideas and thoughts and hearts. And if you think about all the popular movies throughout history, there is one consistent theme in all of those. When you think of shows like Lord of the Rings, or when you think of TV dramas like Friends, the idea is, if you notice, from take to take to take, from scene to scene to scene, they are always together. And this Cheers kind of mentality where everybody knows your name. Even though these acquaintance relationships turns into what would be considered where everybody knows your name, is mostly based upon the idea of proximity. So everyone goes to the bar every single day, and they just have these conversations, and through these conversations, a familiarity is born. So proximity is something that is essential for a friendship. If you do not have proximity, if you do not have, and I'm talking about physical proximity. Now, people have said on different occasions that, oh, you know, I can call them every day on the phone. And I would say, yes, that's a level of proximity when you're talking to somebody on the phone. But here is something that people miss, because I've actually heard this in the misconceptions of friendship. Well, I talk to them almost every day. I've said this before. Writing is the lowest form of communication. Another low form of communication is phone conversation. Why? What is similar between writing and phone conversations? Well, you're missing some of the most essential parts of communication. I'm sure you've heard this many, many times, but around 70, 80, 90, it keeps changing every year. But the bulk or the majority of communication between two people or a bunch of people comes through non-verbals. So the way you communicate in life is not so much about what you say or what comes out of your mouth, but how you say it. So what's interesting about this is, if you think about some of the relationships that are probably considered the closest, I've referred to this before in previous videos. Marriage is one of the most difficult, and I would say just as challenging or more challenging than requirements of a friendship. is a marriage. A marriage relationship is very, very difficult to sustain and continue on for many, many years. But one of the reasons it's considered one of the closest of relationships, the bond, the pair bonding that goes on, is because of this essential idea of proximity. When you are married and you are with this person, you're living with this person day to day to day to day, most of what's happening in your relationship is not what you're saying. It's what's being seen through the nonverbals of living together. So when you wake up, how do you act? You don't have to say anything, but what's your attitude like when you wake up? Are you a grouch in the morning? Or are you somebody that's really friendly and chipper and you're just like a morning person? Or are you a night person? How does that connect with other people? All of these things are communicated and allow a person or a relationship to connect on a deep level or not a deep level based on how those connections happen from the nonverbals. When you're talking on the phone, even once a day, which most people don't do that, unless it's like a blood family. But if you have a friend that you talk to once a month, you have missed all of the nonverbals that are going on in their life from day to day to day to day. And then when you do get on the phone with each other, I would say about 80 to 90% of your conversation is doing one thing. That is catching each other up on your lives. So now you're talking in third person to your friend, trying to, from third person, kind of detail them on what actually happened into your life, and they have to imagine and kind of try to connect to that. Whereas if you have proximity and you're with each other day to day, hour upon hour, you naturally have that connection and you naturally have that communication going on without having to say a word. Now we're going to get into this later when we get to the other two. And I'm not saying that proximity is the only thing you need to have a deep relationship, hence why I have the tri-ship. But it is essential to have this foundation more than anything else. If you are not in the same area, if you are not spending time and hours and minutes with this person, I guarantee you and I promise you, you don't have a friendship. I have many people who try to muddy the waters and they say, oh, but we talk 2 or 3 times a week. We talk on the phone. Totally different. Totally different. It does not allow for the inevitable connection of a deeper relationship to take place when you're constantly missing out on the nonverbals of each other's lives. So I'll tell you right now, if you want a deep connected friendship, if you want to call somebody a friend, the very first thing that you need to do is you need to spend a lot of time with them. Just as the quote said, when it reflects, the cinema reflects the cultural desires and needs and wants and things that bring happiness. All of these shows have that one consistency. They're spending a lot of time with each other.
Way out of here. I want to way out of here for. I mean, I'm going to fucking live here the rest of my life. Be neighbors, we'll have little kids, fucking take them to Little League together up Foley Field.
The difficulty in all of this is that if you were to ask most people, and you were to ask them this concept of living with your best friends or taking each other to Foley Field and taking each other to the basketball games with your kids and raising them together, hanging out like you would most of the time, most people would be down for that. Most people, I guarantee you, they get excited about that. So then what's the problem? It's the problem of our society and the risk and sacrifice that we have to take in order to have that kind of life. So what I think subconsciously happens is that people just kind of ignore or they kind of slough it off as, well, that's kind of impossible life. We can't live that life. I'm too busy. I've got kids. I've got this. I've got that. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. Busy, 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 busy. And what we do is we automatically downplay the possibility of this desire and need that is actually in us, that when you think about it without, okay, if you weren't busy, if you didn't have all these things to do, would this be something that you would ideally like? To be around the people that you love and the people that you have fun with all the time. Most of the time, or much of the time. You can then discuss how much of time you want to do. But if you could have that and you could paint that picture, most people would say yes. I mean, if you said no, then I'd be questioning why you're friends with these people in the first place. But when you think of friends, I think it's about being with people that you care about and you love. If you could be around them on a consistent basis and having fun together, being in a relationship together, most people would say yeah. But the problem is we quickly just put that to the side because we're busy, or we think we're busy, or two, to have that kind of relationship, it starts to actually live that way, starts to become more risky, and it starts to become more difficult. So we just kind of quickly push it away as something that's impossible to do. And we don't live like that. Instead, maybe change the idea and the priorities like we talked about in video number 2. And then you change the priorities to, hey, instead of me raising the kid by myself, okay, I have kids, I have a son or a daughter, I've got to take them, I got to take to their baseball game, I got to take them to the football game. Well, why can't like your friend and their kids go and you make an effort to try to make it a friend family that goes together as a community? Therefore, you don't have one dad and one mom taking care of one kid or 2 kids, which is impossible to do. But you have a community of people which are friends that are close and tight-knit, taking care of the kids together, each other's kids, sharing the load, sharing the burden together. This is such a different way of thinking that I think we've lost the ability to see that even as a possibility. When really, if we just put forth the effort, it is a possibility. Spending time together creates close relationship.
I don't appreciate your tone, Stephen. Friends aren't supposed to speak to each other like that.
What are you talking about? We're not friends. I don't even know you.
Well, let's change that. Let me buy you a Heineken.
Now, I guess the rabbit hole is starting to go a little bit deeper now, and some of you are saying, really? What is he actually saying? We are only scratching the surface, but for the sake of time, I don't want to be talking for 40 minutes either. But I hope that I started to help you understand that it is a necessity, and the first part of the tri-ship is proximity. You must be around people often. Now, I'm not trying to define how often that needs to be. However, I will say it at least needs to be quite a bit of time during a week. So if we're talking like you see each other once every couple weeks, once every month, I personally don't believe that's enough time for you to create what I think requires a friendship connection. That is more, in my book, an acquaintance. And again, acquaintances are good as long as you have some of these other relationships that go beyond those commitments. And this kind of commitment to spend time together, yes, it takes some priority. It takes you some effort.
Oh yeah!
To take time out of your schedule and rearrange your schedule to be with these people.
Oh yeah!
And so this is the first step. As you will see in the next 2 videos, proximity is not the only thing that you can have. If it is the only thing that you have and you're just around each other all the time, that's not going to create a friendship either. But we'll talk about that in the next 2 videos specifically. However, to have proximity is to establish the ability to have the other 2. You cannot have the other 2 unless you first have proximity. So if you're not spending time on an often, almost day-to-day basis with these people or the people in your life, then I would essentially say that they're probably not going to fall in the friendship category. They're going to fall more into the acquaintance category. But we'll talk more about that in the next 2 videos. So I'll be interested in the comments down below because there's a lot that we can talk about just surrounding this idea of proximity, but I just wanted to quickly try to go through it so we could get on to the next video and idea. But in the comments below, try to take a guess what you think the next 2 are. As well, in the comments below, tell me what you think about this idea of proximity. I'm guessing this is going to be a little bit of a stretch for most people because we're not used to living like this. And in a society where we're becoming more and more independent and more busy, the harder it is to fit people into our schedule. But this is killing relationships. So as always, like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video of the series. Peace out.